Hey everyone, I hope you're all doing well as always. Today's video is going to be on sightings and encounters with certain cryptids that are more famous than some of the other ones I might cover. Usually I might do like a story of an encounter, but these are separate encounters and I'm going to group them all together. So we have the Mothman, we have Bigfoot, we have Glimmerman, we have a couple other ones. Who knows what's going to happen in the video, so pull up a stump as always and let's jump in. Thank you for watching. So first up we have the Mothman. Now the Mothman is definitely one of the most famous cryptids out there, right up there with Bigfoot I would say, in my personal opinion. The most famous and most often first sighting that comes to one mind when thinking of this specific creature is Point Pleasant, Virginia from November 15th to December 15th of 1967. The sightings of this creature is said to be almost looking like into a crystal ball of sorts and telling the future of the Silver Bridge collapse, which claimed the lives of 46 people. The Mothman has always been known to appear before tragedies or before something terrible happens. When I was young and first reading about the Mothman, I found it crazy how I was told a story from my great-grandfather about if a certain type of moth is to be sighted, it can mean bad luck or that someone else in the family will die shortly. Now as a kid this fascinated me, and at the age of 11 or so, I actually wrote a theory about how I thought those moths and the Mothman were connected. Those stories aside, however, it hasn't only been Point Pleasant that people have been known to see the Mothman. In fact, the Mothman has been seen in some variation all over the world. One of those, though, would allegedly be 32 years to the month in 1999 by a woman named Scarlett, link in the description. This encounter is allegedly 80 miles south of Point Pleasant in Fort Gay, West Virginia. The witness says that her and her family had just recently moved to Fort Gay, West Virginia. The new house was up on a hill which was on a back road at the time of the sighting. The population of the area was said to be around 2,000 people or so, and on one dry November night the family was still unpacking their things into the new house, and most things still resided in boxes, and the furniture had not been set up yet. Feeling overwhelmed with working all day, Scarlett went to bed at 11 p.m. She put her little brother on the couch, and she slept in his bed as her bed wasn't set up yet. In her brother's room was a window that was about 20 to 25 feet off the ground. This witness says that she was looking out the window when she was laying down when she saw it. A creature was set up in a tree approximately 50 feet from the house. The tree was also approximately 50 feet in height. She said she was overcome with a terrible feeling and that all she could do was sit there and stare at it. She couldn't breathe, she couldn't blink, and it felt like an eternity. It had big, red, glowing eyes and was looking straight at her. When she got the mind to pull the covers up over her head, she heard it thunk against the window. She ran through the house screaming. Her parents tried to talk her down, and her father went outside against her, pleading for him not to. The father, by this time, found nothing outside, and when the girl told her story, the family thought that she was imagining things. The witness says that she can still not go to her car by herself and needs someone to go with her. She had heard of crazy things happening down that road, but never really expected to have an experience herself. She believes 100% that she saw the Mothman, even mentioning the movie The Mothman Prophecies, and how her husband asked her while watching the movie if this was what would happen to her, and she said it was like reliving the night all over again. But what do you think? Do you think this is a real account of a Mothman sighting? Or do you think it's fake? Let me know in the comments. And this isn't the only account of a Mothman encounter I have for you today. For this one, I would like you to come to the beautiful country of Japan. Given recent events that have happened in the last year, a lot of us may not be able to recall what happened to Japan back in 2011. In March of 2011, a magnitude 9 earthquake struck Japan, causing absolute disaster. The earthquake generated a tsunami that wrecked the east coast of Japan. And then, to make matters even worse, the damage caused to the Fukushima nuclear power plant caused it to go into meltdown. And I don't have to go into detail about the havoc and carnage that a meltdown like this can wreak. Apparently though, in the weeks before this absolute disaster, there was a sighting of the dreaded Mothman. A man named Marcus Pules was on a business trip in Japan a month prior in February of 2011. He was visiting and staying with a friend who had been living in Japan and teaching English in the small town of Okuma, which is in the Fukushima region. The two friends were walking by the seaside of the town and were following a path that eventually led near the power plant. The man says that he heard a whooshing noise, which was originally taken for the water hitting the rocks, but the sound was followed by a screech that, quote, shook him to the bone. The two men looked around for the cause. It was compared to the sound of brakes when they are in need of service. They spotted another couple while looking for the source of the sound, who were visibly afraid. Marcus says that he looked toward the power plant and could make out a large, shadowy figure. It looked to be perched on top of one of the buildings. The figure unfurled its black wings and flew into the sky to circle the power plant several times. And I will leave links to the more detailed articles down in the description. Do you think that the Mothman was indeed at Fukushima and was a harbinger of what chaos was about to unfold? Do you think these sightings are real, or do you think they are hoaxes? Let me know down below. I haven't done a video on Bigfoot in a while, so I figured that this would be the perfect time to do it, and I would include it in this video. As always, I ask, do you think that Bigfoot is real? There are many theories as to what the Bigfoot, Yeti, Yowie, Sasquatch, etc. might be. I won't get into every theory that I have ever heard about the Bigfoot phenomenon, but I would like to talk about one of the wildest theories before I get into some sightings. So I read a lot of stuff. Some of it sticks with me and some of it just doesn't. I'm not anywhere near an expert on this stuff, and I'm largely new to it besides a general interest due to an experience from when I was a kid. But that aside, the wildest theory that I have ever heard somewhere about what exactly Bigfoot was that it's an extraterrestrial. And not just any extraterrestrial, but the pet of a more advanced species, sort of like a dog would be to us. And this more advanced race just drops Bigfoot off on Earth while they go off and do alien stuff, I guess, and then they come back and pick it up. I can't remember whose theory that is or where I read it, so you'll hopefully bear with me on that. Anyways, wild theories aside, I would like to talk about not just one Bigfoot sighting, but a cluster of them, spanning decades in the Umatilla County in Oregon. So before we really jump in with those, I thought that it would be good to give a few facts about Umatilla County so that we aren't going in blind. The county was created on September 27, 1862. The Umatilla Indian Reservation was established by the Treaty of Walla Walla in 1855. It is a total of 3,231 miles, with 16 of those being water. It borders the Columbia River across from Washington. A 2019 estimate has the population at 77,950 people. And there are 4 listed national protected areas: the Umatilla National Forest, the Whitman National Forest, Cold Springs, and McKay National Wildlife Refuges. So now that we know a little bit about the Umatilla County, I think it would be good to jump into our first encounter. So this one takes us all the way back to the summer of 1969. The witness was a kid at this point and was on a family get-together on the La Grande Ronde River. They drove out of La Grande North for around 2 hours. A lot of the time was on a dirt road. The witness talks about him and other kids doing things that regular kids do during this trip, like swim and explore the area that they are camping in. I think they explored 2 miles pretty much in every direction, so they were really busy. Some of the adults would go upstream and fish, while the mom and aunts would chill back at the campsite. The trip was described as completely normal until 3 or 4 hours before sunrise, so the middle of the night. The witness was woken up by the sound of a, quote, cougar monkey. He is quoted as saying, "No one in 1969 talked about Bigfoot," and mentioned how his grandfather's generation discussed the old man from the mountain. The witness figured this was akin to the boogeyman, but when he woke up, he couldn't believe that everyone else had been sleeping through the noise. Just up the river was the sound of breaking branches, like somebody was swinging huge branches into trees and breaking them. These branches made large thuds against the tree trunks. The thing hooted and hollered like you would expect a very large primate to do. It was described as making the sound of a cougar sound placid. Do you think that what he heard was a real Bigfoot? Or was it as the man's father put it, and he said that it was an out-of-control party that far back in the forest? Let me know what you think. The next sighting takes us to August of 1974 on the northwestern side of Indian Lake. The witness was at a youth camp with 10 to 15 other counselors and about a dozen other students. One night at the campfire, a strange yell bellowed down from the mountain. The witness says that he asked repeatedly what the yelling was, but was ignored. But at this point, the yell was getting closer, and the counselors randomly decided that it was time for everyone to go to bed. Once in the teepee, he asked a counselor that was in the teepee with him what the noise was, and was sharply told to go to sleep. Somewhere during the night, he was awoken by a sensation of the ground shaking. He was just about to peek under the teepee when the counselor grabbed his arm and told him to be still. The next morning, everyone pretended as if the previous night did not happen at all, but they broke camp pretty fast. The person was quoted as saying, "Our Native American teachings have taught us that these big people are just curious, nothing to fear, but they should be left alone and left unnoticed." My little side note here is how I think it's really cool how a lot of tribes, like from all over North America, have stories about men from the mountains or people from the forest and all that we can assume now to be Bigfoot, and they even have like interactions with them. I don't know a whole bunch of them, but I think it's really cool. That's just my little side note. This one is from June of 1976 on the Umatilla Reservation, south side of Emigrant Springs. The person says that their mother was driving with their family over Emigrant Pass by Pendleton when they decided to stop and stretch their legs. The uncle of the storyteller, who was blind, said that he smelled a very foul odor in the air. While stretching their legs, some of the family members looked over the cliff and into the canyon below. At first, they thought what they were looking at was a bear by the stream, until it stood up on two legs and walked away. It looked to be drinking on the stream via cupped hands as put by the mother. This figure was described as having long brown hair, and when it stood and started walking, it looked like a tall human grizzly. It was at least 7 feet tall. Before it went into the forest, it turned around to look back at the four people, and then disappeared into the forest. There are many sightings in this cluster that span over quite a few decades. I will leave links in the description so that you can read the full reports if you want to. To quickly go over one of the more recent ones, in August of 2020, campers reported to hear vocalizations near Meacham, a region with the history of such reports. The Bigfoot there is called the Umatilla Screamer. So what do you think is going on in this cluster? There are people who will obviously discount all of these as hoaxes. Are you one of them? And why? Do you believe in Bigfoot? Why? While reading through these and thinking about them after I read through some of them, I was thinking of the elusive nature of Bigfoot, and then I wondered, does Bigfoot bury its dead similar to humans? And if they do, is it a sense of respect or family with one another? Or is it to conceal themselves further? Maybe both. Who knows? It was just a thought that occurred to me. And I guess to kind of get the noggin jogging, as they say, how many Bigfoot do you think live in this area? Is it just a small amount that cover a wide territory? Or is there like a little community deep in the forests? Let me know what you think. The next cryptid I would like to talk about is called the Glimmerman. Now I'm going to be honest, I don't know a whole bunch about the Glimmerman besides finding a few stories. It was suggested to me to look into by one of the patrons, and I think it was Tina, so thanks Tina for kind of getting me into this. It's really interesting, and it's my understanding that the Glimmerman is sort of like a human version of what Predator can do in the movie. And I'm not saying that that's what it is, I'm just saying that that's what it reminds me of. So I have a couple Glimmerman stories for you. And this is kind of a new cryptid to me, so if you have anything that I can read on it that I haven't found, then let me know down in the comments. And of course, the sources to these stories will be left in the description if you want to read them for yourself. My name is Justin, and I have what's been recently coined as a Glimmerman sighting. I thought about this many times since it happened. I grew up in the 80s and early 90s, listening to my mother's ghost stories and UFO sighting stories, but I never took much stock in them. So when I had the experience that I had, I didn't tell anyone because I've never heard of another person seeing something like what I had. It was 2001 in mid-August, which I remember because my birthday had just passed a week or so before this happened. I was living with my mother in her home in Short North in Columbus, Ohio. I was watching TV in the living room around 10 p.m. The overstuffed chair I was sitting in faced the dining room, and the TV was to my left where the window was. I was alone in the house as my mother was probably at work. She was the manager at her job and normally closed. I had just started to think that it was off that my mother's dogs weren't in the room with me. They followed me everywhere, usually until my mother got home. I began to feel alarmed, I guess, like something was off. I couldn't put my finger on it at the time, but the feeling intensified over the next few minutes. At some point, I felt like I wasn't alone. I glanced over at the door leading to the dining room, and I saw it, and I was struck with fear. Standing right inside the doorway was what I can only describe as a predator, except it was human in shape and size. It couldn't have been any taller than me, and I'm only 5'7". It didn't move. It stood fixed in that position for several seconds. Then, it lunged forward and crossed the room very quickly. All I could do was close my eyes and cover my face, and I felt the air brush my hands and arms like something had moved quickly toward me. After what felt like several minutes, I managed to convince myself to lower my arms and open my eyes. I was alone in the room. Whatever was there was not anywhere to be seen. I sat for a few minutes trying to calm down. Then I proceeded to the game room, which was toward the front of the house. My mother had a billiard table, a dartboard, golf clubs, and a few baseball bats in there. I picked up a baseball bat and made my way through the house, room by room, looking for whatever it was that I saw. The only thing I found was my mother's dogs, hiding under the computer desk upstairs in her office. What did you think of that one? Did you have a similar experience and not know what it was? Let me know down below. This last one is from Georgia in 1978 in the fall. This is a strange encounter I had years ago in Georgia. Mind you, I've only told my brother and wife about this encounter, and it took place 41 years ago, so here it is. It was the fall of 1978. It was deer season in particular. I lived near a very small town called Sasquatch, Georgia. It only has a population at that time around 1,000 people. It's in the southwest end of the Chattahoochee National Forest. I'm an avid hunter, and I was hunting on public land in the National Forest just up the road from Sasquatch in an area called Cooper's Creek. I had scouted the area during the summer, so late July, early August. I knew where all the game trails were, and I knew where the water was located, which happens to be a small creek known as Bryant Creek. And I knew where all of the ridges and gaps were. I've hunted in and around this area for years and was very familiar with the area. When I finally located a good spot, or at least a spot I thought would give me a good chance at a large buck, I set up my lock-on tree stand in a tree about 12 feet off the ground. I trimmed the branches to give me some shooting lanes, and basically was all set for deer season. Oh, I was hunting with a 12-gauge shotgun. Rifle hunting is not allowed in this area. So fast forward to early November. I had been hunting in my tree stand about 6 times by the time this particular hunt happened. It was late afternoon, around 4:15 p.m. I wanted to get there earlier, but work held me up. We had hired this new kid named Ryan, and he was really slowing me down all week. Anyways, this was a Friday, so I just finished up work, jumped in my truck, and headed out to my hunting spot. Now, this was my normal routine for a Friday afternoon during deer season, and my wife knew that I would not be home until 8:30 p.m., and even later if I bagged something. So I parked my truck at the trailhead and started hiking into the woods to find my tree stand. The walk would take about 15 to 20 minutes. You want to walk pretty quickly, but not run. You don't want to make too much noise moving through the woods. You don't want to spook any of the wildlife. As I was walking to my stand, the first thing I noticed was how quiet it was, and I mean it was very quiet. I didn't hear any of the normal chirping or singing birds, no insects, nothing, and only a slight breeze. I thought it was a bit strange, but continued on to my deer stand. I finally arrived and climbed up and settled in. Once I was comfortable, I jacked around into the chamber, put the safety on my shotgun, and began surveying my surroundings, looking for anything that was out of place. Sometimes deer bed down during the day, and you can spot their antlers above tall grass in the underbrush. And as I was doing this, I began to have this ominous feeling that somebody was watching me. I don't really know how else to explain it, other than that I had this deep feeling, deep within me, in my core, in my gut, that something was not right. Well, I tried to ignore it for a while, telling myself to stop being such a coward. There's nothing out here but you, some deer, hopefully, some squirrels, skunks, and other little critters. As time passed, the feeling only intensified. I kept looking at my watch, wondering how much time I had left until dusk. Should I leave early? I thought to myself. Of course not. A huge deer was probably only moments away. As I was sitting there arguing with myself, I caught movement to my right side in the trees. I slowly turned my head and began looking through the tree canopy, and that's when I saw it. This is a part that still gives me chills. Even writing this now freaks me out because I honestly do not know what I saw. As I was staring into the trees, I saw what looked like a large bodybuilder, but was completely blurry, moving through the trees. I could clearly see the outline of the figure, but the rest was all blurry, like I couldn't focus on it. It looked like a clear, gelatinous blob in the shape of a human, a very large human. And whenever it would stop, I completely lost sight of it. It blended right into its background perfectly. I just watched it for what seemed like an eternity, but in actuality it was only more like 15 minutes. It moved through the trees effortlessly, like a monkey or a squirrel. It never even looked at me while I was watching it. Maybe it was before, and that's why I got the feeling somebody was watching me. I don't know. It slowly moved off, and I was scared about my walk back to the truck. So I just sat around and waited for another 30 minutes. It was getting dark now, and I slowly climbed out of my stand. Once I hit solid ground, I wasted no time. I sprinted all the way back to my truck. I jumped into the cab of my trusty Ford pickup, and my lungs were on fire. That was the farthest and fastest I've run since basic training back in 1967. I just sat there in my truck and tried to regain my breath. I drove home and said nothing to my wife or anybody else for a few weeks. As time passed, I tried to convince myself that I imagined the whole thing, that I just dozed off in the stand and had some sort of weird dream. But I couldn't get the idea of that thing out of my head, so I broke down and told my wife over dinner one night. She just listened and said that it was probably my imagination. I later told my brother, who said something similar along the same lines. I never told anyone else, and I never hunted in those woods again. I never went even back for the tree stand. It was only like $300, and I didn't want to go back there again, not for a measly $300. I took a break from hunting for about 10 years and then started up again, but never in that area. I still wonder what I saw that day. I have no rational explanation. But later, in 1988 or so, I saw the Arnold Schwarzenegger movie, Predator. I couldn't believe it when I saw it. I jumped up and yelled at my wife, "That's what I saw. That's what I saw. It looks just like it." I don't know if the writer had a similar experience as mine, and that's what inspired him to make the Predator cloak look the way it did in the movie. Or perhaps he heard some other eyewitness account, but that's almost exactly what I saw in the woods of northern Georgia in the fall of 1978. Mind you, not the reptilian-looking beast with lasers, but the cloaked part. So what do you think about Glimmerman? Let me know. So I hope you enjoyed the video, and I hope you had fun pulling up a stump for all these cryptid sightings. If you liked the video, please like and subscribe, and I shall see you in the next one. Thank you for watching.